Hi guys, Belladonna Black here. Here's another creepy little story just for you. So turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let's begin. Friends have asked me for years to write down the story, and I finally agreed now that I'm only a few weeks away from retirement. I've worked as a social worker for the past 30 years in the New York City borough of Brooklyn. The job was incredibly stressful, but I know for a fact that I improved the lives of dozens of families. There was a point, about 13 years ago, which nearly caused me to say, fuck it, and walk away from the profession. I still deal with the lingering effects of the post-traumatic stress disorder in this period of my life. I hope that writing all of this down will help me finally put this case to rest so that I can enjoy my retirement. The fall of the Soviet Union gave childless American couples the opportunity to adopt needy white children. Thousands upon thousands of children from Russia and Eastern Europe were adopted in New York during the 1990s and 2000s. Now it was said that the vast majority of these adoptions produced genuine, happy families. The children were excited to have loving families, and the adopted parents were excited to have a child to love. I was adopted, so I took a natural interest in any social welfare cases that involved adoption children. Some children had difficulty transitioning to life in the United States, while others were victims of abuse. Almost every adoptive case I worked with had a happy ending. Every adoptive case, except for one. But I hesitate to say that the child in question was actually a child. Sometimes I think that I legitimately was dealing with pure evil in human form. The Pulaski were a young couple, successful couple, living in Brooklyn and commuting to their jobs in Manhattan. They had it all: wealth, good looks, charm, and generosity. I could go on and on about these two. The husband, Ryan, worked on Wall Street, while the wife, Jenny, worked at a marketing firm a couple of blocks away. They had everything but a child, as they had not been able to conceive despite trying for 3 years. Ryan's great-grandfather emigrated from Russia in the early 20th century, so Ryan and Jenny decided to look to Russia for a child to adopt. They worked through a local Russian Orthodox church to facilitate the adoption, which told them that they had the perfect child in mind. An 8-year-old boy named Dmitry, with blonde hair and blue eyes, was looking for a home. Both Ryan and Jenny took 2 weeks off from work and flew off to Moscow to meet with Dmitry. They learned that Dmitry had appeared outside a church at the age of 3. His records were suspiciously vague, but the couple were charmed by the boy's good looks and grasp of the English language. They filled out the necessary paperwork and agreed to return in 1 month to accompany Dmitry back to the States. Over the course of the next month, they excitedly prepared for Dmitry's arrival. When Ryan and Jenny landed at the airport in Moscow, they were surprised to find Dmitry, accompanied by 2 police officers, waiting for them. The smaller police officer stepped towards the couple and said in halting English, "Russia is grateful for your generosity. As a way to show our appreciation, we have agreed for you to take the next flight out of Moscow, which leaves in 1 hour. Your hotel reservation was already cancelled." Ryan and Jenny looked at one another in confusion. Jenny stepped forward and said, "What happened to the priest we met with last time? We were expecting to meet in the same church as last time." Dmitry spoke up and said in flawless English, "It's okay, Mummy. My time here is done. Let's leave now." Ryan later told me that he should have followed his gut and demanded to meet with the proper authorities to figure out what was going on. However, youth, inexperience, and being in a foreign country led them to go along with the situation. They never failed at anything before in their lives, and they weren't going to let Russian bureaucracy ruin their plans of having a child. So they took Dmitry back to New York, intent on creating a perfect family. The couple did everything right. They enrolled their child in the most expensive private school in New York, hired a therapist experienced in working with adopted children, and spent every minute of their free time with Dmitry. Their first year as a family seemed to be perfect to any outside observer. Dmitry proved to be incredibly gifted, and his teachers remarked that he was the most intelligent student they had. The therapist also noted Dimitri's intelligence and said that Dimitri seemed to be the perfect child. Ryan and Jenny weren't so convinced. They discovered that Dimitri routinely snuck out of the house at night and would wait until they were asleep to leave and return just before morning. They tried to discuss this issue with Dimitri, but he denied it all while wearing a slight smile on his face. Ryan and Jenny became even more concerned when Ryan observed Dimitri practicing different facial expressions in front of the mirror. Dimitri would put on an expression of happiness and then shift to one of sadness, then to one of concern, then terror. In between each expression, his face would appear dead, devoid of all emotion. After the first year, they decided to switch Dimitri's therapist. He would now see a behavioural therapist, as well as a psychiatrist. Both the behavioural therapist and psychiatrist sensed that something was off with Dimitri. They advised the couple to deadbolt the doors to their house at night and keep the only keys with them so that Dimitri could not sneak out. Dimitri did not respond well to this increased restriction and began to show his true nature. Dimitri started to manipulate the other children at school. He would get them to fight one another with scissors and pens, which resulted in a 3-week suspension. Jenny was forced to stay at home from work to monitor Dimitri. We don't know exactly what happened during that time, but Jenny had a mental breakdown and was committed to a psychiatric hospital. Cigarette burns were found on the bottom of her feet by doctors. Whether they were self-inflicted or done by Dimitri is something we'll never know. The school allowed Dimitri to return after Ryan made a large donation. He was expelled 4 weeks later when authorities learned that Dimitri had convinced 2 other students to make false molestation charges against the school principal. This is where I got involved. Child Protective Services were called after the students first reported the claims of abuse. The students kept to their story for a week, out of fear of Dimitri. However, the students eventually told the truth to their parents, which exonerated the principal. The students claimed that Dimitri had threatened to cut their hands off if they did not make the reports of abuse. They said that Dimitri had pulled a severed human hand out of his bag as proof of what they would do. 3 police officers and I visited the home of the couple to interview Dimitri, as well as search the home. A severed human hand was indeed found, as well as a collection of prescription eyeglasses, wallets, watches, and car keys. They asked Dimitri where he had gotten these items, and he responded that he had found them in Ryan's room one day while he was away at work. The officers immediately went to search the master bedroom, while Ryan sputtered in disbelief. The police found a bloody kitchen knife, as well as a taser under his bed. They arrested Ryan immediately on suspicion of murder, leaving me with Dimitri. I called my supervisor and volunteered to care for Dimitri until this mess could be sorted out. I regret that decision to this day. Dimitri wore a lopsided grin for the entire ride back to my house. Every attempt I made at starting a conversation with him was met with silence. Not that surprisingly, considering what he had been through. I introduced him to my wife and 2 daughters and let them know that he would be staying with us for a few days while we worked on a more permanent living situation. The next morning, I got a call from the detective leading the investigation against Ryan. He wanted me to bring Dimitri in to speak with him immediately. When we got to the station, the detective pulled me aside and said, "All of those items we found at the couple's residence were linked to 6 brutal murders from the past year." I said, "Has Ryan confessed yet?" Never would have suspected he was capable of anything like that. The detective paused, glanced over his shoulder at Dimitri, and whispered to me, "It wasn't Ryan. His alibis for the night of each murder check out. His fingerprints are on the kitchen knife, yeah, but only because it was from his kitchen. Fingerprints on everything else as well as surveillance footage from one of the murders point to a different suspect." I said, "Okay, good. So Dimitri can go home with Ryan?" The detective looked at me sharply and said, "You're not getting it. Dimitri isn't going anywhere. We have video evidence that shows him using the taser on a man and then pulling him into the alley where the body was found. Don't ask me how an 8-year-old did that, but we're charging him." He then left to take a phone call in another room. For a moment, I couldn't think. I watched as two officers approached Dmitri and attempted to place him under arrest. A look of pure rage crossed his face as he pulled out a small knife from under his sweater and managed to stab one of the police officers, for another officer knocked him out with a blow to the head. That monster had slept in my house. I slowly turned to leave and pulled out my phone to check the time. I saw 9 missed calls from my wife. I remember a feeling of pure dread wash over me. I stood there, frozen in place. My wife had never called me so many times before. She knew that I turned on silent when I'd done business, would wait until I turned the first missed call. The detective tapped me on the shoulder, and the expression on his face told me everything. He took me back to his office and I collapsed into his seat. I didn't want to hear what he had to say. To delay him, I asked for a cup of coffee. He came back, closed the door, and said, "Your youngest daughter." I sniffled a sob. He continued, "Your youngest daughter was found hanging from the ceiling this morning by your wife. It wasn't suicide. Her hands were bound behind her back. Dmitri is obviously the main suspect. We have no idea at this time how he managed to hoist up your daughter, who is more than twice his size." I took a leave of absence from work for an entire year to deal with the aftermath. I went to Dmitri's trial. I tried to get them to sentence him as an adult, but they wouldn't. Some bullshit about him being too young to know what he was doing. They conveniently ignored all the psychiatric and intelligence tests, which showed he had cognitive abilities better than most adults. I suspect that the Russian authorities knew exactly what Dmitri was capable of. They used the adoption system as a way to push the problem onto someone else. Dmitri turns 21 tomorrow and will be released from the high-security psychiatric hospital where he is held. I'm getting the hell out of New York City and pray the police keep a close eye on him. Hey guys, thanks for watching. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment below, and subscribe to my channel. You can also check out my Facebook page and my Twitter. Both links will be found in the description below.